Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today this is episode number 69. It's a nice episode, and I'm joined by a nice co-host that is Bryan Smith. Bryan, how's it going, man?
That's a way to be introduced. Good work. You're a professional now after all 69 of these.
Man, I've been dropping the episode number. I don't think I've done that more than like 3 times over the course of the show. Because I used to, with the old show, I would lead off with the episode number, which I don't know why I did. I was like, oh, I might as well. That's just part of it. And then more than half the episodes, I would forget what episode we're on. And I was like, this is not even worth doing anymore. So I figured this episode would be a good one to point out that it is episode 69. We're chugging along with this show, man. This is we're getting along. This is episode, I think, number like 20, or this might be episode 29 of this season, like this year's podcast. Which is fun. I mean, we're in the heart of the season, like we talked about last week, the past couple of weeks, really. We're hitting like the dog days, not really the dog days, but like the when everything is hitting at the same time, right? The prospects are in action, the draft is hitting, prospect lists are going on over Northside Bound. This is our prospect
Trades
list
might
week.
happen.
Trades might happen. This is our prospect list week at Northside Bound. And the reason we do it this week is we do it ahead of the draft, so we don't have to also draft or put the draftees in the list. And then also, so we're ready for the trade season. If the Cubs trade away prospects, we can say the Cubs just lost their 13th best prospect or whatever it might be. But I mean, it's looking less and less likely they're going to be trading away prospects. But that's I digress. Today, we are talking about just some news and notes throughout the organization. We're going to end with some prospect list talk because as of this recording, we're recording this on Monday night. I came out with my new prospect rankings over at Northside Bound. Bryan, you dropped your like mini prospect ranking over on Twitter. You did that this past weekend, right? On Saturday,
Friday? On the 4th, yeah.
On the 4th. So we're going to talk a little bit about comparing and contrasting our list that we have here. We'll do more talk about prospect lists down the road at some point here. I'll do a live stream on YouTube where you guys can jump in and ask questions about my prospect list. That'll be more in-depth later. We're just going to kind of touch on the surface of this in this episode. But with the All-Star break coming up and the draft coming up, we got news this past week about the Futures Game participants for the Cubs, which is always like, I don't know, that announcement's always one of my favorite things. Announcements throughout the year. There's a lot of announcements in minor league baseball. The player of the week, the player of the month, the all prospect team through MLB Pipeline. There's always announcements, but the Futures Game just kind of hits different. And the Cubs have 2 participants in the game. And that is Owen, Caissie, and Matt Shaw. And then we'll get into Moises Ballesteros because he will be down in Texas for the festivities, kind of filling a different role. But I don't know. What'd you think about Owen, Caissie, and Matt Shaw being the representatives for the Cubs in the Futures Game?
Yeah, really cool. Back in the 2000s, I spent a summer working at Baseball America, and Baseball America then had a big role in choosing the Futures Game rosters with kind of coordinating with Major League Baseball. And I remember sort of being in a conference room while the powers that be were sort of figuring out, and it was like one of the coolest parts of that internship. And one of the things they always prioritize is trying to get as many countries represented as possible. And so it makes total sense to get Owen Caissie there, to get Canada some representation. I think he's, as good as it gets for a Canada prospect right now. And Matt Shaw just had such a good June, and, I think has so many fans in this Cubs system that really enjoy following him. It's always good to get sort of recent first round picks in there too. So yeah, 2 great picks. I'm excited and hopeful that we get to see them play.
Who were the Cubs representatives when you were at Baseball America? Do you remember?
I don't. They actually, oddly, the one thing I remember is that the White Sox had a Brazilian prospect, and he was like the one player from Brazil, that was stateside at the time. And so even though he wasn't like one of their top 30 prospects, they were like, we got to grab, we got to notch another country off the list. So I remember that very clearly, but I don't remember who the Cubs would have been. Actually, Felix Piet's were probably like right around the time where it would have been him.
Okay. Yeah. Well, oh man, Felix Piet. That's a fun name. You kind of alluded to it, but both Owen Caissie and Matt Shaw have been out of the lineups for their respective teams for Iowa and Tennessee over the past few weeks. Both a little banged up, and so at this point, we might be looking at a situation where they were both selected to the team, but neither actually play, even if they're healthy enough to be back and playing for Tennessee and for Iowa. Maybe they don't play in that futures game because they're still working their way back. That might be interesting. But to me, like, obviously, it's fun to watch Cubs prospects on that stage against all the other top prospects in baseball. Like that watching that game is way more exciting for me to watch than the All-Star game.
Totally.
And I think there's also other people that share that sentiment, even though they're not prospect followers. Like I think you can say like seeing the future of baseball in minor league games. Like, yeah, you do. Like you can go to a South Bend Cubs game or a Myrtle Beach Pelicans game and see future major league players on those rosters, but you're also seeing a lot of dudes that don't make it to the majors. Watching this futures game, it's like I don't know what the percentage of players that end up making the major leagues are, but like I would bet it's a awfully high percentage.
Yep.
And not only percentage in terms of making it, but like you see the rosters and they're guys that make it within the next like year or two. So they're much more short term, which is really fun.
Yeah, and even if Matt and Owen don't get a chance to play, I would imagine they still let them go, and they'll probably be well enough to participate in something like batting practice, which is a big kind of a big moment for those players. Every player gets their batting practice put on Twitter, and really cool for their families just to get the uniforms and things like that. And then I would imagine if they don't play, I think it would make a lot of sense for the league to just allow Moises Ballesteros, who will be in town, to suit up and play in the game. So I guess I'll put that call out now. Major League Baseball, we better still see a Cub in the game, even if Owen and Matt can't go.
I think it only makes sense. You mentioned it. We are going to see Moises Ballesteros, even if it's not in the game. He is one of 8 players that was selected to this new event down at the Futures game called the Skills Showcase, which I kind of love this. I hope this is a trial run for maybe seeing it for major leaguers doing this. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. But
I love it too, but I'm so confused. Why did they select players that weren't selected to be part of the game?
I don't know. I don't get that. Well, I mean, I guess with the home run derby, you see, like in the Major League home run derby, you see players that are not part of the game in the home run derby.
Yeah.
But so for the skills showcase, basically what it is there's 8 players that are selected, 4 for the National League and 4 for the American League. There are 3 different, I guess, mini games. It's based, honestly, what it's based off of is the old MVP baseball video games, the MVP or the MVP 05, 04 video games that we used to play on the PlayStation 2 back in the day. It's basically based off of that, where there's 3 different elements. One is the hit it here challenge, where there's different points set up in targets in the outfield, worth 4 points, worth 8 points. If you hit it closer to the middle of the target, you get more points. There's also bunt targets on the field, which if I see a player bunting, then I mean, what are we doing here? But basically, if you're peppering the gap in left and right center, you get 4 points. If you're going down the right and left field lines, you get 8 points. It kind of adds more benefit to being able to place it in strategic places across the field. The second step is called call your shots, and in call your shot, you have left, center, and right field, and as a part of that, you get to call where you're going to hit the ball. I think you get extra points for saying you want to hit it to left field versus your pull side versus your opposite field, stuff like that. And then the third element is swing for the fences, where it's a home run derby of sorts, but you get more points if you hit it to the opposite field. So if you're a right-handed hitter, or I guess we'll talk about Moises Ballesteros, who's a left-handed hitter. If he's pulling the ball to right field for a home run, he gets 6 points. If he's hitting it to center field, he also gets 6 points. But if he's going the opposite way to left field, which he does so well, he gets 12 points for that home run. So it's big on like the power, but also like good feel to hits. And I feel like Moises Ballesteros is perfect for this.
Yeah, the call your shot one. I can already imagine him, going out to left center there. He'll probably be like, "Can I hit it in this little 5-yard gap in left center?" And he'll nail it. It's very odd that center field isn't worth more points than a pulled home run, but we're not here to criticize.
Yeah, no, I just think that in the system, I'd argue that really Moises Ballesteros might be like the guy that would show the best in this, right?
Totally.
I mean, there's a reason why he's one of 8 players in all of baseball that got selected to participate in this. But I think it's gonna be cool. I'm definitely gonna tune in and watch and check this out because this is gonna be super, super fun.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else futures game related that you wanted to talk about?
No.
We got a promotion, man. We got a promotion to talk about, and it's a fun one. It is Hunter Bigge. I know that this is a fun, like, all the promotions up to the major leagues are always fun because we get to talk about it on this show because he's still a prospect, but all the major league blogs and podcasts and stuff like that are also talking about it because it's affecting them directly. So I always like talking promotions. Hunter Bigge is absolutely deserving of the chatter here because what he's done from the day he was really drafted, but especially this year, is just so deserving of a promotion.
Yeah, I mean, listeners of this show, if you go back to spring training, you know that if you were going to hear any podcast talking about Hunter Bigge early in 2024, it was this one. We were obsessing about his spring training performance when nobody else cared. I promise you that. And credit to Hunter that after an injury following spring training, he was able to rehab that, get back on the mound, and then by the time he got to AAA, he was in total like ready to go regular season form and absolutely dominated and earned this promotion. And we've been calling for it for weeks now, and I think it's pretty overdue. You saw Lance Brosdowski on Twitter basically said that he's the Cubs' best reliever the moment he takes the mound. So that's very high praise, and I'm excited to see it. I was at Wrigley on Sunday, and Cubs were winning 5-0 in the 8th. Luke Little was warming up, and then Bigge started to warm up when the Cubs got a runner on base. Very clearly, Counsell was thinking, 5 runs, probably not quite enough for a kid in his first outing. But if it gets to 6 or 7, we'll put him in there. I was just pleading with the Cubs to get another run, but that's a foiled exercise this year doing that, and they didn't quite get it. And then Luke came into the game, and Hector Neris finished it out, but it would have been nice to see his debut, but it's coming soon, and he's going to do great. He's he just showed up to 2024 ready to ball out.
I want to run through some of his numbers this year in AAA because they've been absurd. They've been downright ridiculous. And then I'll kick it to you for some of the pitch mix and what to expect as far as what he brings to the table. This year in AAA for Iowa, he threw 11 2/3 innings. He had an ERA of 0.77. That's good. He had an opponent batting average of, I had it right here. Hold on. He had an opponent batting average or under 100, I believe is what it was. Yeah. 0.54 was the opponent's batting average against him, which sounds fake, but I promise it's not. The whip was 0.69. The strikeout rate was, sorry, I'm all over the place a little bit here. The strikeout rate was 44%. The walk rate was a little high at 14%, but like when you're striking out 44% of the batters you face, I think you'll live with a walk rate a little bit above 10. Just, I mean, across the board, like he was absolutely tremendous, and he looked I think that the point that Alex Cohen kept getting across whenever Hunter Bigge would come into a baseball game is that he looks like a closer now, right? Where in past years he's always like he's had the good stuff and he's produced good results, but like the mentality that you can tell that he has when he's entering a game is like, I now know that I'm better than you. And I'm going to go out there and shove, and I'm going to blow this fastball right by you because I can. And it's a different demeanor on the mound than he's had in past years. And it's I think it's done wonders for how strong, how much he's locked in when he takes the mound.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where he trained this offseason. Maybe actually, I think it was maybe with Caissie in Florida that he went down there, and it just very clearly made a huge difference, not just with the quality of his pitch mix, but like you said, with the confidence. I think the thing that's going to stick out is the velocity, high 90s. But in AAA, the cutter just absolutely ate. I think Lance also said that it had a 70% whiff rate in AAA, which doesn't even make sense. And to be honest, it was not a pitch that sort of was my favorite of his, dating back to last year. Even in spring training when we saw it a few times, it didn't jump off the page the way the fastball did. But man, he's kept on it. It's clearly become his best secondary. What's really helpful is that it's going to help him get lefties out.
Yep.
And the fastball, The thing that I think we really need to watch with that is in spring training, the life on the fastball was incredible. He was getting like 22 inches of induced vertical break, which is absolutely elite, like Jeremiah Estrada-ish. That has come down a little bit. There have been outings in AAA that it's been as low as like 14, 15, which is pretty mediocre. So that I think is sort of the swing skill. Does the fastball have real life on top of being 98 miles per hour, or is it a little flatter and straighter? That's probably like, is he a 6th, 7th inning guy, or is he an 8th, 9th inning guy? That's I think the thing that it hinges on.
Yeah, obviously the fastball is good. The cutter is good. He kind of manipulates that slider and cutter so that like depending on how he needs to use it, it can be clearly slider, it can be clearly cutter. I think there's also kind of like an in between that he he uses from time to time. He
I
manipulates.
would guess it's the same grip.
Yes, yeah, he just throws it harder or softer.
Yeah, there's probably like a finger pressure thing that changes it, but it's probably coming out of the same grip because the cutter has quite a bit of horizontal movement.
And Lance specifically called out his curveball as well as a really solid offering too, which I've seen less of that. Like I haven't paid as close attention to that because the cutter, slider, fastball mix is so good. So I'm curious to see like what his pitch mix ends up looking like at the major league level and how hot he kind of works with Bigge. That's going to be really important to watch.
Yep.
But yeah, man, I don't know. I think that if you guys out there want to go check out some like just electric Hunter Bigge, it's go watch his July 4th save for the Iowa Cubs. I believe he struck out the first 2 batters he faced, and then actually the third batter gave it a pitch a ride. I think he flew out to the warning track, but it was just that outing was like I was watching that and I was like this looks like
he's
closer.
Ready.
Like, like is he going to be the closer in Chicago this year? Like I don't want to expect that. I don't think we should expect that. Relievers are so weird, they're so strange. But it looked like he was ready on the 4th. You just watch it and you're like, this is a major league pitcher. This is not a AAA pitcher. So well-deserved promotion, and we know the major league bullpen needs help, so he's there.
I think he's probably done enough to survive the 40-man roster this offseason, almost no matter what happens the next couple months, which I think is just a testament to how far he's come in the last 6-9 months. I think the question that he can answer here is he a guy that should be fighting for a spot next spring training? Is he a guy that is automatically sort of guaranteed a 26-man roster spot because he pitched so well down the end of the season? Or is he like, we're going to put him in pen for either the 7th or 8th or 9th inning guy? Like that is still out there to be won for him, no matter what happens with the 2024 Cubs. Like Hunter Bigge, in a sense, is playing for a 2025 sort of certain role here with what happens the next couple months.
Yeah. Anything else on the Bigge promotion besides just happy as hell?
No, I'm happy we got Bigge and Little together. Big and Little.
I saw I think Josh commented. I saw you post the Bigge Little or the Little Bigge picture. And I think Josh commented on your post saying it's a shame that we traded Bailey Horn. It could have been Little Bigge Horn. So
right. There's a taco place in downtown Chicago, but maybe a half a mile from Wrigley Field called Big and Little's that's excellent. And so I would hope that they're aware of what's happening and putting out a promotion here. Otherwise, I should probably stop in the restaurant and demand some money for my genius marketing idea.
That'd be pretty good. I was crafting up some ideas for Hunter Bigge, but I mean, Joe over at Obvious Shirts has the jokes write themselves. The T-shirts write themselves for him. The Obvious Shirts are going to be going crazy if Hunter Bigge ends up being a key member of the Cubs bullpen for the next few years. That's gonna be fun to watch. From one promotion to another promotion, I reported earlier this past week that Brandon Birdsell that his next start will happen in Iowa, and the official promotion has not come down. The official transaction has not happened yet. But the word was that his next outing would be for the Iowa Cubs. Now, a little wrench thrown into everything is he did have his first child this past week. It was soon after that came out. So congratulations to Brandon and his wife. That's super exciting. I don't know. I don't know if he will make his scheduled start, his next time in line, obviously, because I don't know when he'll be back. But it's exciting to see Brandon Birdsell up to AAA. I mean, that draft is looking pretty damn good as far as pitchers go. And I think right now, as of this very second, on July 8th, I think you can probably consider him MLB starting pitcher depth. Now, is he the next guy up in Chicago? No, but like once you get up to Iowa, you can be considered that starting pitcher depth. And like he kind of fits that mold, you know?
Yeah, if he needed to pitch a start in Wrigley, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, we're recording this podcast on the evening of July 8th, which means that it has been 44 days since Brandon Birdsell walked a batter. That is absolutely absurd. His last 6 starts in Double-A, 35 2/3 innings, 28 hits, a 2.52 ERA, 32 strikeouts, and 0 walks.
It's outrageous.
And I think what that probably told the Cubs is, we need to put forth a challenge that actually does make him walk some players. Like he needs to feel the need to walk guys sometimes. That is like, it is important that sometimes you have to put that guy on. He did give up 7 home runs in those last 6 starts. And so there needs to be a little bit probably of sort of a mindset shift out there. He has the stuff to strike probably more batters out than he does. And I think he has the stuff to play for the edges a little more to help avoid the home runs. And, I think what he's probably proven to himself is that if he gets a couple runners on because he gives up a hit and then he walks somebody, his control is good enough that he's not going to keep making the problem worse by walking more and more guys. So it's one of those situations where you need to have confidence to walk the first guy because you have confidence you won't walk more guys.
That's a good. I have never looked at it in that way. That's a really good point with Birdsell, because the command may not be elite, but the control is. I mean, the control is great. Like, I'm not gonna call it elite, but like it's pretty damn good. The stuff. I think the stuff is good. Like, I think the stuff is not. I don't look at it and like, oh wow, this is amazing. But I think the stuff is good. The arm action, he still throws with that arm action where you look at the Lucas Giolito where like he's throwing from his ear. It's like it feels like it's somehow he's throwing it from like in front of his, like he's throwing from in front of his face. Like it is such a short arm action, and I think it helps that fastball kind of get up on hitters a lot faster than what it's even coming in. And it's coming in, it's getting what, like 94 miles an hour or so on the fastball. So like I think that the stuff is good enough, and I think the control is good. And so I don't know. There's something there with Brandon Birdsell. I'm not going to say he's a top 10 prospect in the organization. I didn't say he was a top 10 prospect in the organization, but he's not below 30, and I feel pretty confident in saying that. So to say you have a top 30 pitching prospect in Iowa is fun.
I mean, what's cool for him is he doesn't have to be added to the 40-man roster for Rule 5 protection until after the 2025 season, but he's now put himself in line to start 2025 in Iowa. So if you are in a spot where you're in Iowa with your Rule 5 year being at the end of that season, you are like first in line when something's needed to get called up. So he's really, really put himself sort of very firmly on the 2025 call-up list. And so now it's just like he goes to AAA, he develops a relationship with those coaches, including Tony Kugel, who's been familiar with him for a long time, probably onboarded him in Arizona last year. And they will come up with a plan and they will work on it the rest of this year. They'll be in contact this offseason and they will start next year with that same plan. And essentially you're looking for a jump like what happened with Hunter Bigge to happen in the stuff. And then you've done everything else to prepare yourself to be called up. And so, good on him. He's firmly on the map here. He's rising up prospect lists. And he did what he had to do to this point. And I think the stuff has to get a little better, but he's answered the call so far.
I was just say he's followed the blueprint kind of perfectly since the day he was drafted. So you can't really ask for much more than that. Let's bring the mood down just a bit before we talk about prospect lists. We got to talk about Brennan Davis injury again. It was reported, I believe Tommy Birch reported this last week from the Des Moines Register, that Brennan Davis did find himself, he did get a back fracture He has a back fracture, and he was out of the lineup for about a week or so, and we knew something was up as far as him being banged up. It is a back fracture. There's no timeline on his return back to the lineup. I don't want to speculate too much, but it is a back fracture, so like I don't have high expectations for the season. I feel like it's just as a former top prospect in this organization and a guy that pretty much every single person who's listening to the show, and even people that aren't, root for Brennan Davis harder than anybody else, right? Like we want Brennan Davis to succeed. It's worth pointing out his kind of current status, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll emphasize again, Brennan, we've been fans of Brennan for a really long time. We've both interviewed him, gotten to know what a nice kid he is. He's had obviously this awful string of luck, and this is particularly killer because he was in really good form, and was a really nice sort of comeback story this year. This is just, this is how sports go sometimes, and it's rough. I think it's very sort of clear that his 40-man spot will be really hard to hold on to this offseason. The Cubs, every major league team faces a crunch at some point, and that's coming. And so you have to wonder, do the Cubs, try to get him through waivers now, put him back, outright him to the minor leagues, and then try to sign him to a successor contract? If I'm sure of anything, I'm sure that the Cubs will try to find a way to keep him in the organization, even if that 40-man spot can't be held, kind of like they did with Ethan Roberts and, plenty of other players over the years. And so they'll work on that. If that's not in Brennan's best interest, if it's better to go somewhere else, like, I fully support that too. If him and his agency think that there's a path to playing time in the major leagues that's more clear in an organization that has less outfield depth, like, go find that. All I want is Brennan to ultimately fulfill his dream of being a major leaguer, and he has the talent. He was so close this season. And I think that he can get back to it. He's certainly familiar with the rehab process and how to beat it. So, best of luck.
I had the Brennan Davis promoted to Chicago draft ready to roll earlier this season. So over at Northside Bound, that's how close he was. I had the draft ready to hit send as soon as the news came out. So yeah, I mean, I think that you nailed it. I think it helps it. Yeah, like you said, any way that he can make a major league roster, like, go out and get it, dude. Like, go make that happen with another team if it comes to that, obviously. But what he does have, like Ethan Roberts, what he does have on his side is he's very clearly a super talented baseball player. And two, he's also very clearly well liked throughout the organization by teammates, coaches, front office staff. And so that's a guy you want to keep in your organization. And if it's possible to do that, So hopefully everything works out with Brennan. Unfortunate set of circumstances, especially like you said, considering all he came back for and how well he's been playing. But wishing nothing but the best for Brennan in his return from his back fracture. So let's go ahead and get into some prospect lists. I was looking at my list that dropped today. I dropped my top 30. I dropped my top 30, and then I also included like 11 honorable mentions because I just didn't know where those guys fit. So I threw 30 with honorable mentions of 11 guys. You put out a prospect list on Twitter that went 12 names deep. And I think the first thing to point out right away is that we have the same top 12 prospects in the Cubs system.
Yeah.
And I think that in looking at those 12 guys, I don't think it's like super surprising that that's the case. I looked at your ranking, and I really already had my ranking done when I looked at yours. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. It's kind of hard to, I mean, it makes sense that it's those 12. It definitely makes sense the top 7, right? If you're looking at like my list, I went Cade Horton, Owen Caissie, Matt Shaw, Moises Ballesteros, James Triantos, Jefferson Rojas, Kevin Alcantara. Those 7 guys. That's kind of the big 7, right? I've referred to them as the big 7 the past couple of days. Those are basically all consensus top 100 prospects. If you're looking at Pipeline, Baseball America, Prospects Live, Just Baseball, all of they're almost all in every single top 100 that you'll see. And So those are your guys. Like if you have somebody not one of those 7 in your top 7, it's kind of like I'll kind of like look side-eyed at it a little bit. It's those 7 guys, right? You can order them pretty much however you want, but it's those 7 guys.
Yeah, I guess I have 2 questions for you coming out of the list making process. The first one is related to those 7. The Cubs have their draft pick here in about a week, picking middle of the first round. Do you see any world in which, say, in the next 6 months, you would put the Cubs' first round pick into the top 7?
Oh, good question. That's a really good question. I don't know if the Cubs get a James Tibbs or in any college bat that does what Matt Shaw did last year, you kind of have to think about it. I don't know where he fits. I don't know how you incorporate him into the mix. Actually, here's what it is. Here's what happens. It's if the Cubs get a college bat that comes and does a Matt Shaw this year, makes it up to Double-A, and Kevin Alcantara doesn't figure it out. I think if Kevin Alcantara, he's starting to get a little hot right now, but if he tails back off and he's hovering around a 650 OPS, then yeah, I think that whoever the draft pick is slots above Kevin Alcantara in the top prospect list.
Okay, I think that's fair.
I mean, I once had Kevin Alcantara as my number 3 prospect for a hot minute. I had PCA, then Cade Horton, and then I had Kevin Alcantara above Owen Caissie, above Matt Shaw, above all those guys. But like I said on my list, like I think you can only dream on the potential for so long, and at some point you have to see results. And I know we're seeing a hot stretch from him, but like I need like prolonged results from Kevin Alcantara, and I'm not really seeing it quite yet. I think the tools are all there. I think that 4 of the 5 tools are still there. The bat to ball skills I think aren't gonna ever be plus. They're probably not ever gonna be average, right? But the pop, the speed, the fielding, the arm, like they're all good. It's just the contact skills and the kind of plate approach, and then his ability or his inability to put everything together.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It'll be interesting. I could see a scenario where, depending on the Cubs draft strategy, and I don't remember this happening before, that they end up with their first and second round pick kind of immediately slotting back to back in my prospect rankings, where like putting kind of de facto putting the picks 8th and 9th with Jackson Wiggins then sliding to 10 for me I could easily see that happening depending on the 2 players. And I don't remember a time that I would have thought that before. So that I think is really telling on how the system looks right now is that those 7 are sort of, I mean, you did even more tiers than that, but that those 7 are on a high tier. And then there is a really sort of significant gap before you get that next group of names: Jackson Wiggins, Alfonso Rosario, Christian Hernandez, those types of guys. And so that really sticks out to me. My other question was, what was the hardest sort of back-to-back 2 guys that were next to each other that you had to figure out?
I'll cheat and say 3 guys. The Owen Caissie, Matt Shaw, Moises Ballesteros. Yeah, I've ordered them in all 3 like in different ways. Like I put Owen Caissie 2, Matt Shaw 3, Moises Ballesteros 4. So I went Caissie, Shaw, Mo. You had it where it's Matt Shaw, then Moises Ballesteros, and Owen Caissie.
Yep.
That's fine. Sure. You know, like I went back and forth so many different times with those guys. I think that like the Owen Caissie, Moises Ballesteros conversation is really interesting. And I think that like it's tough to have that conversation because like it doesn't take much to convince me of those guys. Like if I say like why do you have Moises Ballesteros over Owen Caissie? Actually, I'll ask you that right off the bat. Like what made you put Moises Ballesteros over Owen Caissie? Because I know you were a guy who's a big believer in Owen Caissie. I think you had Owen Caissie this past offseason ranked above the rest outside of Cade and PCA. What changed in your mind with those 2 guys specifically?
Yeah, I think that was sort of what I viewed as my most significant ranking, because it was the first time that I've put Mo over Owen. I think, you know, I think for so long I sort of focused on the doubts that I had about Ballesteros. I kind of wrote this in my little one tweet about him in the rankings, that, questions about the body, questions about catching, they just sort of hung over the positives for me, and sort of not overshadowed them as much as, it just, you felt that con in the ranking as much as you were like, you knew what you were going to write for the pro and you knew what you were going to write for the con always. Yeah. I think what he's doing in 2024 is really like putting the question, like, those are cons, but are they big enough cons? Like, are you really going to be that worried about it? If it's this good, if the hitting skills are this good, like, do they really matter? Yeah, he might not be a good catcher, but if he's hitting this good, like, don't you just kind of want to deal with it? And, yeah, it looks like the body's never going to be a very good one. But if he's this talented at getting the bat to the ball, like, do you care what he looks like wearing his jersey? And, increasingly as we get closer to the major leagues, like, I don't care at all. I don't. And when I look at the Cubs catching situation in Chicago, like, yeah, all I want is for him to be the catcher. I could care less if he throws runners out, because we don't throw runners out in Chicago anyway. His framing could be a little shaky, but, like, we don't have great framing in Chicago anyway. So I'm ready for him to catch for my favorite baseball team. And if I'm willing to sort of make that leap, to me, the pros are firmly outweighing the cons.
Yeah, I think the thing for me with Owen over Ballesteros is just the significant leaps that we've continued to see from Owen Caissie and everything outside of hitting. Mm-hmm. It's like his ability to play a good outfield corner now, and him run the bases well was enough to, like, not that, like, that's what you're focused on. With both these guys, you're looking at the bat. So, like, don't get me wrong, I'm still looking at the bats for both those guys. But for me, there's a little bit more of a floor where I'm like looking, it's like, oh, like, he can at least play some good outfield defense. I with Ballesteros, he's the highest at number 4 for me. That's the highest I have. I'm viewing him as a DH first base still. That is the highest I've ranked a DH first base prospect in my entire time doing prospect lists. I've never ranked a first baseman DH that high. Now, the Cubs have had a gap in that position for years and years and years, so that doesn't help. But I get so worried about that profile in prospect ranking, and so I think the fact that I have him 4 in my eyes was like, I'm just impressed I have him there. He deserves it. Absolutely. But it's like, I just haven't done that before. And it felt weird going up to 2 for him, for me. But yeah, I think that, dude, you're right. You do reach a point with Ballesteros that it's like, the bat's just damn good, dude. And I think that the bat is, it's tough to say this because Owen Caissie's had a great year in AAA this year. I think, like, the bat is more major league ready than Owen Caissie. I think he knows who he is as a hitter right now. I think Moises Ballesteros knows who he is. I think Owen Caissie is still, like, trying different versions of Owen Caissie. Like, for the next 3 weeks, it's like I am pull heavy Owen Caissie. Right. Then 3 weeks, three weeks after that, it's like, let me put the ball on the ground to the opposite field. It's different versions of Owen Caissie, and, like, Moises Ballesteros knows exactly what he is, game in and game out.
Yeah, I think that if you just had somebody watch 2024 film on the Cubs' top 7 prospects, they would walk away with Ballesteros being the number 1 prospect almost every time. Yeah. We talked about it in the 1060 West Discord. Somebody was asking about, would it be crazy for Ballesteros to end up as the top prospect in this system this winter? I don't think it's crazy at all, because I think he's, like, significantly outplayed Cade Horton this year. And, I guess there were weeks where Matt Shaw was probably the better player in Tennessee. And then there were a whole lot of weeks where Ballesteros was the better player too. I think, you said it really well. Like, his plan of attack at the plate, the Cubs basically had one thing to do in the last couple of years, which was like try to get him thinking about power every once in a while on certain pitches. And it was actually, from what I was told, not as easy a process as they thought it would be, given how instinctually talented he is. But then it clicked. And now that that's clicked, like, he does not need a lot of instruction or development anymore. His plate coverage is some of the best in the minor leagues, as sort of seen by that Futures Game invitation. Yeah, I mean, he's about ready to go here. I totally understand if they decide to wait until next year, and there'll be some sort of, I'm sure there'll be some reasons both related to his development and related to sort of the organization's offseason plans that would play into that. But if they called him up today, it would be well justified. He is a major league hitter.
Let's dig in real quick to what you just mentioned, where if you're taking the top 7 guys and ranking them based on if you only looked at them this season, if you're not based on past years, I think you're right. I think Moises Ballesteros is clearly ranked first in the system.
Mm-hmm.
I think that as good as, I don't know, Matt Shaw or James Triantos, who's your number 2? Because I think it has to be one of those 2 guys as your number 2 prospect this year. If you're only looking at them, not just reading the stat line, but just like watching what they've done this season, I think it's got to be Shaw and Triantos, right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, Triantos, man, what Triantos did in June would have really swayed somebody.
He hit 400.
Hit 400, and he showed. I mean, probably his best power month of his minor league career. I don't know that for sure, but that'd be my guess. Yeah, he's right up there. I mean, he's another guy that, I mean, him and Ballesteros for me they were on the outside of those tiers in the off season, and I think we said it in the last show that you and I taped together, like those 2 guys stepping forward the way they have this year makes up for every, like, if you have depth concerns in the Cubs system, like the fact that those 2 guys are so good, to me, outweighs everything else.
Yeah. Well, let's pull back a little bit then, because in looking at when I started compiling my rankings here and like really going in depth with it a couple of weeks ago or so, the organization, the system looks entirely different than it did a year and especially 2 years ago, where I'd say a year and a half ago, you had a ton of guys, 12 dudes that you're like, they have a legitimate top 100 arguments, but they're either back into the top 100 or like they're like 12 top 150 dudes in the organization, right? It was that was when you had PCA and you had Jordan Wicks, and you had other guys that were all like Ben Brown. You had guys that were all right there, but none of them were top prospects. None of them were like consensus dudes, except for PCA and I guess Cade Horton, right? Both those guys were. But after that, you had a whole bunch of depth in the organization. Like you also felt good about the depth. Maybe not like as good as you did probably 3 years ago in terms of like you got guys down at 50 that's like they could do something at the major league level. But you had a lot of depth. There was a reason why in my preseason ranking this year I went 50 names deep. Now, are 50 dudes going to make the major leagues? Like, no, of course not. But like, there was a reason why I went 50 names deep. This time around, I went 30 names deep. It's because you got the top 7 dudes that are all now consensus. And after that, it's just kind of a crapshoot. Like you got Jackson Wiggins and Alfonso Rosario and Christian Franklin and Christian Hernandez and Will Sanders, right? We're matching on those guys in the top 12. But then after that, dude, it just goes off the rails. We're like, I would listen to any argument for like anybody ranked 13 through 35. It's like, make a good argument and I'll hear you out,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, when I listed Will Sanders, I mentioned like 7 more pitchers, and it was basically like, somebody come take the title here as like sort of the next pitcher in the system after Jackson Wiggins. Like you could convince me of so many different names, and really like what's going to convince us is like the next 8 starts. I think if we're being honest about how our prospect rankings are going to work this offseason, like there's 8 guys that are, for all intents and purposes, like tied, where if they do something special in the next 6 weeks, like they will separate themselves for the winter, which is pretty interesting. But I think to what you're saying, it's sort of a grade below how we felt about the number 13, 14, 15 prospects a year and 2 years ago. And so, I mean, that's just the reality of where the Cubs are at. I think there's a ton of really interesting names in the complex league this year. And both the Arizona complex and the Dominican complex, more than I remember in a while. I don't know if you feel that way, but just a bunch of guys that I'm just like, I cannot wait to start watching these guys. The Cubs have had some real drag Arizona complex league teams in the last few years. Like, just you're scrambling to find like 2 names that you think are real interesting. This year, to me, they have like 5, and based on what the Dominican teams are looking like next year, I think they'll have like 7. And so I think they're turning over okay, but it's going to take a year or 2 to sort of make us feel really good about the, say, number 25 prospect in the system again.
Yeah, the complex is really interesting to me because there's a bunch of guys in Arizona that I'm like, I just want to see in Myrtle Beach because I don't have confidence. Joan Delgado, I think, is a guy that is super interesting, but he's also striking out like 35% of the time in Arizona, and he's not like a pure power prospect. So like that's really interesting. Anderson Suriel is down there putting up like OPS over 1,000. He's been very, very good, but
he's been there a while.
Yeah, he's in his 3rd go round in the Arizona Complex League. He's 21 years old, so that's interesting. Angel Cepeda, we feel really good about Angel Cepeda. I've heard nothing but good things since the day he was signed, but also there were swing and miss concerns with him. Derniche Valdez has been on and off the restricted list this season, so he's been really interesting. There's just a bunch of dudes that are like, I'm really curious.
Ramon is the guy who like I had 0 opinions on going into the year, and he's had such an interesting season there.
Yeah, so it's a combination of like guys that are coming out of nowhere, guys that have been there a minute and are performing, and guys that like the secondary numbers outside of like their slash line are not super pretty. Yeah. And it's like, all right, like who's legit here? I just want to get them up to Myrtle Beach. But at the same time, you get them up to Myrtle Beach and you still don't know because you have a situation like Christian or Alexis Hernandez, and like you're like, how much can you trust what they're doing at Myrtle Beach? You got to give them their second go around at Myrtle Beach before you really know what's going on. So I think that's really interesting. I threw Angel Cepeda down at number 27 on my rankings, and he's the only Arizona Complex League guy I included, just only based off of I'm scared. Like I'm scared to rank anybody else is basically what it comes down to. I gave Delgado and Suriel mentions in my honorable mentions, but I'm just scared about all the other complex guys, honestly, is what it comes down to.
Yep.
I do want to talk about one more guy and then a group of guys. One is Christian Franklin, who for me, he was ranked 11. For you, he broke the top 10. And I feel like for him being a borderline top 10 prospect in this organization, we honestly haven't talked about Christian Franklin a whole lot on the show. What do you like from Christian? What do you not like? What's Christian Franklin about in your mind?
What's impressive to me about Christian Franklin is he is a guy that figures out a way to positively impact the games he plays in. He just I think it says a lot about where he went to school and the kind of guys that come out of that school at Arkansas is they come out of school with a real professional mentality, and Franklin, he doesn't have, I think, the best bat to ball skills, although his strikeout rate is way down this year. But I think he grinds through it in a way where like he grinds through at bats, he grinds through games. He's a guy that like his second at bat is going to be better than his first at bat. And like the end result of what happens after a month or 3 months is a guy that just like is impacting his team positively and has his head above water. And like, he hasn't really taken off yet. Like, what I think's impressive about his first half is that I don't think he broke out at all. I mean, we haven't had like the 4-game stretch where he's like had 10 hits, including 3 homers. Like It's just been this sort of like consistent grind. And I do think that like, as he's more and more comfortable and as we get into sort of the heat of summer, like he will find that hot stretch. And I believe that there's more power than he's shown this year. And so, I think out of anything, it was out of respect of just like that league has sucked to be in for a hitter this year. And he's figured out a way to be above average in really like his first go around at it. And to me, that sort of earns a spot in a place in the system that's a little thin.
So when I did my prospect list for every player, I did something I like and something I dislike about them. Like what's been going well, what's been going poorly. And Christian Franklin was an interesting case because I looked at like what do I like, or when I looked about what do I like about him, it's like I just kind of like everything. He is, like you said, he's getting better every year. He's cutting down the strikeouts. We saw him cut down the swing and miss last year. The power numbers are good. The walk rate's above 15%, I think, this year, which is crazy high. He plays a good outfield. Like across the board, he's just kind of a really good player. He's a good baseball player. On the dislike section, I worry that there's not one like elite tool, like one like tool that's not even elite. There's not one tool that stands out. I'm not like, oh, his speed is amazing or his pop is out of the ballpark. Like there's not one thing that I can kind of latch onto. And because of that, like I compared it to kind of a BJ Murray Jr. situation. Different players, right? Like they play different ways. They play different positions. They go about it in different ways. But that was my concern with BJ Murray as he climbed from AA to AAA this year, is that like he didn't have that like one tool. He drew a lot of walks,
right?
But like Christian Franklin does now here in AA. But you can't just draw walks when you're facing better competition, especially if you're not like hitting the ball out of the ballpark. If you're not striking fear into opposing hitters, and BJ Murray hasn't done that, and that's why he struggled a little bit. Now BJ Murray has gotten progressively better in terms of strikeout rate going down, walk rate going up. There's things to like about what BJ Murray has done over the course of the season instead of just looking at like the 620 OPS. It's been bad. Yeah. But Christian Franklin kind of reminds me of that BJ Murray kind of mold. And I'm going to keep a close eye on Christian Franklin whenever he does get that promotion up to AAA, which could be this year in the next I don't know, I'd say month or so. I wouldn't be surprised to see Christian Franklin do that because he's earned it. He's earned that promotion up to AAA. And he's of the age. I believe he's a little bit older than the league average at the AA level in terms of his age. So worth keeping an eye on Christian Franklin's promotion. He's been great. I want to see him continue to be great in AAA.
Yeah, totally fair. I was thinking about him. It's just like he seems like one of those guys that other organizations that just annoy me like turn into really valuable major league players. And when I ranked him where I did, I was just like, well, why not us? Like we deserve one of these guys to break through. And he's like, he'd be such a good example of one of those players that does, because he is highly motivated. He is like very professional. He is an extremely hard worker. Like he checks a lot of those boxes off where, I think that often is the difference between sort of fringe guys that make it and figure out a way to succeed in the majors and guys that don't. Like, I can easily imagine a world where if he was in the Brewers system, he ends up with a 115 WRC plus in the majors in a season. And I'm like, God damn it. At some point the Cubs are going to have that too. So, we'll see, but I just a lot of respect for what he's done this year.
Last topic. We got to end on some reliever talk on this show. And you went 12 names deep. So you obviously did not get to any relievers. You're not going to rank. Nobody's going to rank a reliever. That's not true. It's tough ranking a reliever above like 10 or 12 in the system, unless you really believe in it, which is fine. Yeah. We had a lot of similarities in our top 12. So I want you to tell me why I'm wrong on my relievers, on the order of my relievers. So This is just the order of them, not necessarily where they're like their number. I guess I can go through that too. But I have, in terms of my relief prospects and where I have them ranked, I have Porter Hodge as the highest ranked reliever in the system. He's not, our cutoff over at Northside Bound was July 1st, and he was technically a prospect still at that point. Now he's since graduated, so it's cheating a little. It's cheating a little bit in there. But I ranked him as number 17. I ranked Hunter Bigge right behind him at number 18. I ranked Michael Arias right behind him at number 19. So I have Porter Hodge, Hunter Bigge, Michael Arias back to back to back. You go down a little bit further, and I have Frankie Scalzo Jr. ranked at number 26. And then that is my last guy in the top 30. as far as relievers go. I do mention in my honorable mentions that Zach Lee would be the next ranked relief prospect in the organization. Am I wrong? Or you feel the same way?
No, I hate to agree. You know how like deeply I care about minor league relievers, and like
Oh yeah.
I like, I mean, not even being sarcastic. Like
No, yeah.
this is the show of minor league relievers. Yeah, I kind of think that's right. I think I would have a little bigger gap between Bigge and Arias. And then Zach Lee and Scalzo would be right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that feels about right. Darn it.
I think that the Porter Hodge Hunter Bigge conversation is really interesting because like I have them back to back, and essentially like if you're ranking those guys back to back, it's like all right, like take your pick.
Yeah,
they're in the same tier, but they're literally back to back rankings. Porter Hodge, I think that I view Porter Hodge with like a slightly higher ceiling, and Hunter Bigge with a slightly higher floor. But like they're comparable in a lot of ways, right? Like you got a with Porter Hodge, you got a cut ride fastball. With Hunter Bigge, it's more of just a lot of late life, hopefully, on the fastball with the 98, 99 miles an hour. Both guys have the sliders, the wipeout sliders. Like they're comparable in a lot of ways. Porter Hodge is a bigger dude than Hunter Bigge, but like those are pretty comparable. Like both guys I could see as closing down baseball games in Chicago. Both guys, because they're relievers, I could see them riding the bus back and forth between Iowa and Chicago. So I don't know. It's those two, especially in my eyes, are like super, and they're both in Chicago at this point.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I would say the best breaking ball of those two is Hodges' slider, but I would say Bigge's cutter has had more success in 2024 than Hodges' slider. And I would say the better fastball is Bigge's fastball, but I also think that Hodge has more room for growth and ceiling on his fastball. And so I could easily see a world where he comes in 2025 with the better fastball. So like, I mean, that is like how at the end of the day, like the better major league reliever is going to be the dude who just like takes to the major league life and like is a little crazy enough to throw more strikes than the other guy. Like the gap of these guys is so thin when we get to relievers. It really comes down to just like sort of guts and mentality and health.
And also, I mean, Hunter Bigge has a few years on Porter Hodge. You can see he's more of a finished product than Porter Hodge. Porter Hodge's stuff is nasty, but Hunter Bigge looks like a more finished product. I think I mentioned in my prospect list that like Porter Hodge, he walks a lot of dudes, but he looks wild doing it. Hunter Bigge, when he walks dudes, because he's not immune to walking dudes every once in a while. He looks more competitive with his walks, if that makes sense. Like he's not like throwing it over the batter's head. Right. He's I don't want to say nibbling. That's not right. He's around those. They're more competitive pitches that like I could see a guy swinging at rather than Porter Hodges. I think that's what it comes down to for me in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
All right. Anything else you want to mention before we send our listeners to some things we have in the works?
Speaking of minor league relievers, did you guys touch on Ben Leeper last week?
No, we did not.
No, I think it's just worth mentioning what a absolutely sort of incredible comeback that was culminated in the last 10 days or so. I think Ben pitched in the Arizona Complex League as sort of the first stage back in his latest rehab from yet another arm surgery. You know, we're kind of at the point with Ben that he's doing things on the mound, coming back from 3 arm surgeries that I think one other player has ever come back from.
It is the list is Jason Isringhausen, Johnny Venters, Corey Black, former Cubs prospect Corey Black. Yeah. There might be one other guy, but it's either he's one of either 4 or 5 guys total ever.
Yeah,
ever in history.
I mean, we often call guys out coming back from injury, and you know, and it's always like special and amazing to me that these guys kind of grind through that and return to their best form. But there's something sort of particularly inspiring about what Ben's doing here. And, you know, it would be just so cool if he gets back to Iowa and has some success here. We talked about how close Brennan Davis felt to the major leagues this year. I mean, Ben was, as close as it gets. And so if he were to make the majors, that's one of the cooler stories in the system in a long time. And we got the first check on that road. So just want to call that out.
Yeah, that's worth calling out for sure. And even those other guys I mentioned, those are the guys that have had TJ 3 times. I don't even know if they've returned. I'd have to look deeper into that. I don't know if those guys they returned from Tommy John. So I feel like Corey Black, his third Tommy John, like he was just done. Yeah. So I'd have to look at Isringhausen and Venters, but yeah, that's
Venters came back. Venters is the one I knew of.
Okay,
I don't remember about Isringhausen.
Yeah, but the fact that he's throwing a baseball is miraculous. Is literally miraculous. Awesome. You know. Yeah. So yeah, shout out to Ben Leeper. I want to point you guys to some stuff we got going on because we will be live on YouTube. The draft is happening in less than 1 week. The first round of the MLB draft will be happening on Sunday, July. What's the date on that one? Sunday, July 14th is the day of the draft. We will be going live on YouTube, on the Northside Bound YouTube page on the 14th, on draft day at 6 p.m. when the draft starts. So we'll be live. It'll be me. It'll be Greg Zumak, the draft expert. It'll be Todd Johnson, another draft expert. It'll be Rich Biesterfeld will be on to talk about the draft combine that he saw down in Arizona. Bryan, you'll be on for a little bit. We're going to have Vinny, who runs the Down on the Farm Twitter account. He is very tuned in with the draft from all different angles. Yeah. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be fun just chatting. We've done this for several years in a row now. And so be sure to tune in for that. We'll be live from the first draft pick at 6 p.m. through the Cubs pick at number 14. We'll stay on a little bit after that pick at 14 to kind of give our gut reaction as to who the Cubs just drafted and give our thoughts on that. But I don't know, man. This is one of my favorite things every year. I missed it last year because I was traveling. I was on the road. But like I love doing this.
Can we do a drinking game where every time Zumak does one of these where he scoots away from the mic and he goes, wow, after one of the picks, somebody has to drink?
I love it. We'll see if he listens to this episode because we'll do it and see if he reacts to it. So yeah, tune into that, guys. Again, 6 p.m. on Sunday the 14th. We'll be live. In the meantime, we've got prospect lists going up every single day this week. I think we've got Rich Biesterfeld on Tuesday. We've got, I think that Rich Caissie is on Wednesday. We've got Greg Zumak on Thursday. We've got Todd Johnson on Friday. I posted this past week. I still left the voting open. If you guys still want to participate in the voting, I've got the fan-created poll for your own prospect rankings up at the Northside Bound website. You can go on and make your own rankings. The combined list will come out on Saturday. We've got all kinds of prospect action going directly into the draft on Sunday. And then after the draft happens, we'll have plenty of written content over at Northside Bound on the newest Cubs prospects after the draft. So tune into all that. As far as this podcast goes, I don't know our recording schedule, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. Typically in years past, we've gone after the draft is complete so we can do a rundown of every player the Cubs have drafted. With that being Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, right? Is it 3 days? Yeah, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday this year. The next episode will probably be after Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, so we can break down each of those players. But that is still to be determined. Just look out on all your different podcasting platforms, on Spotify, on Apple, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio, and all that good stuff, and on the Northside Bound YouTube page. So that's all I've got. You can follow him on Twitter at Cub Prospects. You can follow me at Out of the Vines. You can check out what we have to say over the 1060 West Discord channel. And we really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you guys so much. And we'll talk to you in a very short amount of time. Take care, guys.
Go Cubs.